Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 3, Episode 8, The Devil's Bargain. The cargo bay of the derelict freighter was a nightmare made flesh. Nolan's boots stuck slightly with each step, the deck plating coated with an organic film that glistened in the emergency lighting. The air reeked of copper and decay. The crew manifest listed 23 people, Ilara said, her handheld scanner cutting through the gloom. I'm detecting their neural patterns, but they're wrong, distorted. A wet, slithering sound echoed through the darkness. Something massive shifted in the shadows. They're in there, Nolan said, his hand steady on his weapon. All of them. The thing that emerged was barely recognizable as having once been human. 23 bodies fused into a writhing mass of flesh and circuitry, faces emerging and submerging in waves across its surface. Borg implants sprouted like cruel flowers from the amalgamation, but this was far worse than any bored drone. This was the Vorpal's work. Please, a voice bubbled from multiple mouths. Kill us? Nolan raised his weapon, but the creature moved with impossible speed. Tendrils of meat and metal lashed out, wrapping around support beams as it hauled its bulk forward. Ilara, now. The transport beam caught them just as a tendril whipped through the space where they'd stood. They materialized on the bridge of the Lost. Initiate purge sequence, Nolan commanded, his voice sharp with urgency. The freighter erupted in plasma fire. The screams of the fused crew cut mercifully short. As the wreckage cooled in space, Nolan turned to Ilara. The Vorpal's getting bolder. That's the third ship this month. We need to end this. The subspace hub it's building, Ilara said, her expression grave. If it manages to connect with that dormant unimatrix, it won't, Nolan cut her off. Not if I can help it. The stark lighting of Pot Nor's ops center cast hard shadows across the curved Cardassian consoles. Nolan leaned over a central display table, footage of the horror they'd witnessed playing on a loop. The faces of the crew members, trapped in that fused mass, haunted everyone in the room. These communications patterns are unlike anything we've seen before, Trill said, her spotted fingers dancing across the controls. The Vorpal's transmissions appeared as pulsing red lines on the display, converging at a point deep in unclaimed space. The encryption is definitely Borg in origin, but there's something different about it. Ilara stepped closer, analyzing the data. The signal strength suggests they're building something substantial, a hub of some kind. She traced the pattern of transmissions with one finger. See how the signals converge here. That's not random traffic. No, it's not, Nolan agreed, his eyes still fixed on the horrific footage. Trill, what exactly did your blind spot network pick up about this unimatrix? Trill's expression darkened. My sources say it's dormant, or at least it was. But these readings, she shook her head. The Vorpal's been in contact with them for months. And now we have compromised officials feeding them Federation technology, Ilar added, pulling up 2 personnel files. The faces of Gul Revok and Captain Marcus Chen floated above the table. Chen's actions almost make sense, Nolan mused, studying the Starfleet Captain's file. He's trying to protect the colonies that will end up in Cardassian space. But dealing with the Vorpal, he shook his head, that's going to get a lot of people killed. Speaking of getting people killed, Trill said quietly, you need to see what Gul Revok's been up to. She keyed in a series of commands, and new footage appeared. A Cardassian vessel found adrift. Its crew fused together in the same nightmarish way as the freighters. The room fell silent as they watched, the horror of what they were facing sinking in. We need to move now, Nolan said finally, before this spreads any further. The dimly lit chambers of Legate Revok's private quarters reflected the Cardassian preference for shadows and secrecy. Nolan materialized silently in a corner, his dark tactical gear blending with the austere decor. Revok sat at his desk, absorbed in reports. He didn't notice Nolan's presence until a datapad appeared before him with a soft beep. "Good evening, Leggett," Nolan said quietly. Revak's head snapped up, his hand moving toward a concealed weapon. "Mercer, how dare you?" "Before you finish that threat," Nolan interrupted, "take a look at what's on that pad." Nolan tapped the device, and the air filled with holographic images of the fused crew members from the Cardassian vessel, their faces contorting in endless agony. "This is what your new business partner really is," Nolan said, his voice cold. "The Vorpal isn't just another syndicate looking to move cargo. It's consuming entire crews." Revak's face drained of color as he watched the footage. "Where did you get this?" "From what was left of one of your ships," Nolan replied. "I particularly enjoyed the parts about the missing colonists." "You're bluffing," Revak snarled, but his eyes kept darting to the horrific images. "Am I?" Nolan moved to the edge of the desk. "I have enough evidence to destroy you, Leggett. Your career, your reputation, your freedom, all gone with one transmission." Revak's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "Ships. A full battle group. I need them for an operation against the Vorpal." "Impossible. The Council would never." "The Council won't know," Nolan cut in. "He'll designate them for routine patrol duty. What happens after that isn't your concern." Revak stood slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You realize I could have you eliminated before you leave this room?" "You could try," Nolan replied with a slight smile. "But then who would stop the Vorpal from revealing your secrets? They own you, Leggett. I'm offering you a way out." A long silence filled the room as Revak weighed his options. Finally, his shoulders sagged slightly. "When do you need them?" 3 days. "I'll send the coordinates." Nolan stepped back, ready to transport out. "Oh, and Leggett, don't get any clever ideas. This data is set to auto-release if anything happens to me." As Nolan dematerialized, Revak slumped in his chair, the horrific images still hovering in the air before him. The promenade of Umpak nor buzzed with activity as Nolan made his way through the crowds. Fragments of conversation drifted past. Merchants haggling, crews gossiping, and everywhere whispers about the Federation Cardassian negotiations. 3 more colonies to be seeded. Federations selling us out. Federations promising autonomy. But we all know what that means. At a nearby news terminal, headlines scrolled across the screen. "Federation Council to consider. Cardassian border adjustments. Colonial representatives demand." And colonial representatives demand. Nolan tapped his comm badge. "Ilara, locate the USS Meridian." "Captain Chen's ship is docked at the outer ring, Bay 6, she responded. Minutes later, Nolan materialized on the Meridian's bridge. Chen spun from his command chair, face contorting with anger. "How did you get past our shields?" he demanded, reaching for his phaser. "The same way I got past your encrypted communications to the Vorpal," Nolan replied calmly. "Let's talk in private, Captain." Chen's hand froze above his weapon. His eyes darted to his bridge crew before he jerked his head toward his ready room. "In here." Once inside, Chen's professional demeanor cracked. "Those colonies are my responsibility," he spat. "I won't let them fall to Cardassian control." "So you're arming them with Vorpal technology?" Nolan asked. "That's not going to end well, Captain. Better than watching them suffer under Cardassian rule." Chen's fists clenched. "You have no idea what the Cardassians are capable of." Nolan activated a small projector, and the horrific images of the fused crew members appeared between them. Chen recoiled, horror washing over his face. "This is what the Vorpal does to people," Nolan said quietly. "This is what you're bringing to those colonies you claim to protect." Chen's face paled as he watched the footage of the freighter captain smashing his head against the bulkhead. "This was 3 days after meeting with Vorpal representatives," Nolan continued. "Whatever it put in his head drove him insane. Those weapons, I sold them," Chen whispered, his earlier bravado evaporating. "Those colonists I was trying to protect will be the first to go if we don't stop this," Nolan finished. "The Vorpal doesn't care about Federation Cardassian politics. It's using those conflicts to distract us while it builds its network." Chen ran a hand over his face. "Even if I help you, Even if we stop this thing, I'll still face charges for what I've done. Probably, Nolan agreed, but at least there'll be someone left alive to charge you. 3 days, Captain. Bring whatever ships and weapons you can. We're going to need everything you've got. As Nolan prepared to transport out, Chen called after him. Mercer, those colonists, if any of them have already been infected, we'll do what needs to be done, Nolan said grimly. All of us will. The curved displays in ops flickered to life, revealing 4 faces in separate quadrants. General Tolera, Koth, Vex, and Jean Dar, each commanding a vital portion of Nolan's fleet. Status reports, Ilar prompted, standing beside Trill at the central console. Fleet Group Alpha is positioned and awaiting further instruction, Tolera reported. The modifications have been completed across all vessels. Beta Group's targeting systems are aligned and tested, Koth added. No issues to report. Gamma Fleet is ready, Vex said, though I recommend we run one final test of the integrated systems before execution. Jandar nodded in agreement. Delta Group concurs. The drone networks are showing some unusual power fluctuations that warrant attention. Trill pulled up the data on her console. I'm seeing the fluctuations. We'll need to compensate before the operation begins. Nolan stepped into view, his expression resolute. 3 days, people. The Vorpal has already consumed hundreds of innocent lives. I won't let it take any more. The generals acknowledged their orders with practiced efficiency. Years of working under Nolan's command had honed them into a precise fighting force. Maintain radio silence until the specified time, Nolan concluded. Coordinate through secure channels only if absolutely necessary. The screens went dark, leaving Nolan, Alara, and Trill alone in ops. The pieces are in place, Trill said quietly. Nolan nodded, his mind still haunted by the faces of those fused crew members. Now we wait. As they prepared for the coming battle, Nolan knew that defeating the Vorpal would require not just military might, but a complex dance of alliances and betrayals. In 3 days, they would face the enemy that threatened everything they had built, and Nolan was determined to win, no matter the cost. The vast emptiness of space lit up with the emergence of dozens of ships dropping out of warp. Nolan stood on the bridge of the Havoc, watching as his fleet assembled in perfect formation. Tolera's sleek attack vessels formed the vanguard, while Koth's heavily armed battleships created a defensive perimeter. Vex and Jandar positioned their ships to cover the flanks. All fleet commanders reporting ready, Ilara said, materializing beside Nolan. Moments later, Chen's renegade Starfleet vessels appeared on the starboard side, 5 ships of various classes, their Federation markings hastily obscured. On the port side, Rebak's Cardassian battle group took position, their distinctive silhouettes harsh against the backdrop of stars. Open a channel to all vessels, Nolan ordered, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his gut. As the channel opened, Nolan addressed the assembled fleet. This is Mercer. We face an enemy unlike any we've encountered before. The Vorpal doesn't just kill, it consumes. It transforms. Remember your briefings and maintain calm discipline. Execute the plan exactly as we discussed. Closing the channel, Nolan turned to Ilara. What are we seeing out there? Ilara studied the sensor readings. Just a few cargo vessels and what appears to be a partially constructed station. Energy readings are minimal. Something's not right, Nolan said, his eyes narrowing. The readings we're getting are too weak for what we know the Vorpal is capable of. Trill looked up from her console. Sensors are detecting unusual subspace fluctuations around those cargo ships. Nolan's instincts screamed danger. All vessels, evasive maneuvers. Those ships are too late. The seemingly ordinary cargo vessels detonated in sequence, each explosion more powerful than conventional weapons should allow. The coordinated blasts tore through space, revealing a hidden minefield that activated in a cascading wave. Lines. Tolera's voice cut through the sudden chaos on the comm. Taking evasive action. 2 of Chen's ships and a Cardassian cruiser, couldn't react in time. The mines latched onto their hulls and drilled through, exploding from within. The vessels broke apart in silent bursts of flame and debris. Detecting multiple subspace distortions, Ilara reported, her voice tense. They're using some kind of cloaking technology to mask the true scale of the installation. As the smoke and debris cleared, the true nature of the Vorpal hub became apparent. What had appeared to be a partially built station was merely the visible portion of a massive structure. The rest of it seemed to materialize out of the darkness of space as cloaking fields failed, far larger and more advanced than anticipated. Parts of it pulsed rhythmically, like a giant heart beating in the void. By the prophets, Trill whispered, her eyes wide with horror. It's not just building a hub, it's becoming one. The station's outer section shimmered with an unnatural light, revealing organic-looking components fused with alien technology. Massive tendrils extended from the central structure, writhing slowly like the limbs of some cosmic leviathan. What is that thing? Chen's voice came through, shock evident in his tone. That, Nolan replied grimly, is the Vorpal. It's what happens when bored technology merges with biological matter and an active AI. And it's still growing. Without warning, sections of the hub opened like the petals of a monstrous flower, revealing weapons platforms that gleamed with a sickly light. Energy beams lashed out, cutting through two of Vex's ships as if they were made of paper. All vessels commence attack pattern Delta, Talara commanded. Her ships broke formation, maneuvering to flank the weapons platforms. Koth's battle cruisers moved forward, their powerful shields barely absorbing the Vorpal's devastating weapons fire. These are Federation phase cannons, he growled over the comm, but they've been modified somehow. They're adapting our own technology against us, Ilara confirmed, her expression grim. And the power signatures suggest they're drawing energy directly from the biological components. Another volley from the hub struck one of Revak's Cardassian vessels, but instead of exploding, the ship went silent. Its lights flickered and died as it drifted aimlessly. What happened to them? Chen demanded. They're being infected, Nolan realized, watching in horror as the disabled Cardassian ship began to pulse with the same sickly light as the hub. The weapons aren't just designed to destroy. They're spreading the Vorpal's influence. The infected ship suddenly powered up and turned its weapons on its former allies. Target that vessel and destroy it, Nolan ordered without hesitation. We can't let the infection spread. Talara's attack ships swarmed the corrupted vessel, their combined firepower reducing it to atoms. But more of the Vorpal's weapons were finding their marks, and more ships were going dark. Conventional tactics aren't working, Nolan said, his mind racing. The hub is adapting too quickly to our attack patterns. He studied the structure, noting how certain sections pulsed more intensely than others. There. He pointed to a particularly active region near the center. That has to be where the Vorpal entity itself is located. Our long-range scans can't penetrate that area, Ilara said. The hull is too dense, and there are too many interference fields. Then we'll have to get closer, Nolan decided. He opened a channel to the fleet. All vessels, focus your fire on these coordinates. We need to create a breach in the outer hull. The combined firepower of the fleet concentrated on the designated section. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The hull blackened and began to crack under the onslaught. But then, before their eyes, the damaged sections began to heal, organic material flowing like liquid to seal the breaches. It's regenerating, Trill reported, disbelief in her voice. A massive tendril suddenly lashed out from the hub, wrapping around one of Chen's ships. The vessel's hull began to deform as if being digested, its crew's screams cutting through the comm channel before going silent. This isn't working, Nolan said, his jaw tight with determination. We need a different approach. He turned to Ilara. Prepare the havoc. We're going in. Ilara's eyes widened. Into the hub. Nolan, that's suicide. No, Nolan replied, his voice hard with resolve. It's our only chance. The Havoc's weapons can create a breach large enough for us to get inside. Once there, we can deploy the weapon directly at the heart of the Vorpal." He opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Mercer. All vessels provide covering fire. The Havoc is going in." As the fleet repositioned to create a diversion, Nolan turned to Trill. "Gather a strike team. We're boarding that thing. What's the plan once we're inside?" Trill asked, already moving to comply. Nolan's expression darkened. "The inverse quantum flux of a chronotome-infused tachyon beam can destabilize nano-organic fusion at a subatomic level, causing a cascading molecular breakdown in hybrid systems," Mercer repeated. "We find whatever's at the center of all this, and we end it, permanently." The Havoc surged forward, its massive form dwarfed by the monstrous hub. As they approached, the true scale of what they faced became even more apparent. The Vorpal wasn't just building a station. It was transforming itself into a nexus that could spread its corruption across the quadrant. And Nolan was determined to stop it, no matter the cost. The Havoc maneuvered closer to the pulsating hub, weathering a barrage of weapons fire as the fleet provided cover. From the bridge, Nolan could see the structure's true nature, living tissue fused with technology in a grotesque union. "Targeting the central section," Ilara announced, her fingers dancing across the controls. The vibrating hum of the power supply came online, the Havoc's great hull tuning to the wave pattern. Particle beam charged and ready. She shouted over the thrum. Nolan nodded grimly. "Fire." The Havoc's main weapon erupted, a blinding stream of white energy that tore through the hub's outer layers. The beam carved a gaping wound in the structure, like opening a pumpkin or a fat belly. Corridors and chambers exposed to the vacuum of space. Debris, and what looked disturbingly like organic matter, spewed into the void. "We have our breach," Nolan said, rising from the command chair. "Trill, you're with me. Ilara, you have the bridge." Ilara's holographic form flickered with concern. "Nolan, I should—" "You need to keep the Havoc in position," he interrupted. "If we fail, you'll need to destroy this thing from the outside." Trill joined him at the transporter pad, along with 4 of their most experienced specialists. Each carried specialized weapons and the modified Borg disruption device they'd developed. "The hub's internal structure is in constant flux," Ilara warned. "I can't guarantee a stable transport lock once you're inside." "Just get us in," Nolan replied. "We'll find our own way out." Ilara nodded, understanding the unspoken message. If they couldn't make it back to the transport point, she was to pull the Havoc back and join the fleet in destroying the hub, with or without them. "Energizing," she said. Her expression dropped the moment they were out of sight. The strike team materialized in a nightmare. What should have been a corridor was a grotesque hybrid of technology and flesh. The walls pulsed with a sickly rhythm, cables intertwined with what appeared to be veins and arteries. The air was thick with moisture and carried the metallic taste of blood. "Biosigns are everywhere," Trill whispered, checking her scanner. "It's like the whole station is alive." "It is," Nolan replied, his weapon raised. "Stay alert. Move toward the center." They advanced cautiously through the twisting passageways. Occasionally they passed chambers where crew members from captured ships were partially absorbed into the walls, their faces frozen in silent screams. Some still lived, their eyes following the strike team with pleading desperation. "Can we free them?" one of the specialists asked. Nolan checked his scanner and shook his head. "They're too far gone. The Vorpal's nanites have infiltrated their entire nervous systems." A sudden movement caught their attention. A section of wall bulged outward, forming a grotesque approximation of a humanoid figure. It lurched toward them, its features constantly shifting between different faces. "Tiger," Nolan ordered. The team's weapons tore into the creature, but it continued its advance, the wounds sealing almost instantly. Trill adjusted her weapon and fired again. This time, the creature convulsed and collapsed, its form dissolving into a puddle of nanites and organic matter. "Modulating frequency," she explained. It can't adapt if we keep changing our approach. They continued deeper, encountering more horrors with each turn. Defense systems emerged from the walls themselves, tissue and metal forming weapons that tracked their movements. The team fought their way through, losing one specialist to a tendril that pierced through her environmental suit and began transforming her from within. "I'm sorry," Nolan said, ending her suffering with a single shot. After what seemed like hours, they reached what had to be the central chamber. A massive door of interwoven metal and flesh blocked their path, pulsing with energy. "Plant the charges," Nolan ordered. "We'd blow it open and deploy the device immediately." As they prepared the explosives, the structure around them seemed to become aware of their presence. The walls began to undulate more violently, and a low, multi-toned moan echoed through the corridors. "It knows we're here," Trill said, working faster. "We need to move now." The charges detonated, blowing the massive door inward. The strike team rushed through the breach into a vast chamber that defied logic and physics. The space seemed larger than should have been possible, stretching upward and outward in impossible dimensions. At its center floated the Vorpal entity itself, a massive, pulsating amalgamation of flesh, metal, and circuitry. Hundreds of faces emerged and submerged across its surface, each contorted in agony or ecstasy. Tendrils of corruption reached in all directions, connecting to the structure around them. "You cannot stop the convergence," it spoke, its voice a cacophony of dozens of different tones and accents merged together. "We will absorb all. We will perfect all." "He certainly sounds like a Borg," Trill muttered, activating the disruption device. "We're not here to negotiate," Nolan replied, raising his voice to address the entity. "We're here to end you." The Vorpal pulsed with what might have been laughter. "Yes. We are evolution itself. We are the next step beyond your primitive existence." Tendrils shot toward the strike team from all directions. Nolan and Trill dodged, but the two remaining specialists weren't fast enough. The tendrils pierced their suits, and they screamed as nanites flooded their systems. Their bodies began to transform before Nolan's eyes, skin turning gray as implants erupted from beneath. "Trill, now," Nolan shouted, providing covering fire as Trill positioned the disruption device. She activated the weapon, and it emitted a high-pitched whine as it powered up. A pulse of energy shot outward, washing over the Vorpal entity. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The various components of the entity began to separate, technological parts rejecting biological ones. The faces on its surface screamed in unison as the nanites binding everything together began to break down. "It's working," Trill shouted over the cacophony. "We need to get out of here before the whole structure collapses." The chamber shuddered violently as the Vorpal's cohesion failed. Entire sections of the hub began to tear away, exposing the interior to space. Nolan grabbed Trill's arm, pulling her toward the path they'd taken. But it was gone, replaced by a churning mass of disintegrating matter. "Change of plans." He tapped his comm badge. "Elara, lock onto our signals. Emergency transport." The familiar tingle of the transporter beam enveloped them just as the chamber collapsed entirely. They rematerialized on the Havoc's bridge, gasping for breath. "Get us out of here," Nolan ordered, staggering to his feet. The Havoc pulled away from the hub as the structure began to fold in on itself. The corruption that had held it together was unraveling, creating a chain reaction that rippled outward. "All vessels fall back." Nolan broadcast to the fleet. "Maximum safe distance." The Allied ships retreated as the hub imploded, collapsing into a singularity that pulsed once, twice, and then vanished in a final burst of energy that sent subspace shockwaves rippling through the sector. In the sudden silence that followed, Nolan surveyed the remaining fleet. They'd lost nearly a third of their ships, but the Vorpal was gone, its corrupting influence erased from existence. "It's over," Elara said softly. "For now," Nolan replied, his eyes still fixed on the empty space where the hub had been. "Send word to the station. Tell them we won." The aftermath came swiftly. The uneasy alliance that had formed to defeat the Vorpal began to fracture almost immediately. Chen and his renegade Starfleet vessels prepared to depart. "I know this doesn't change what I did," Chen said during their final communication, "but at least those colonies are safe now." "What will you do?" Nolan asked. Chen's expression hardened. "There are still people who need protection out there. The Federation may have abandoned them, but I won't." With that, his ships jumped to warp, heading toward the Badlands, where the fledgling Maquis resistance was gathering. On the Cardassian side, news of Gul Ravok's suicide spread quickly through the fleet. The official statement cited overwhelming evidence of treason and collaboration with an enemy of the state, though the details remained classified. Most significant was the announcement that followed. The Cardassian government, in light of recent events and changing strategic priorities, would begin withdrawing its forces from Bajor. Without Ravok's backing to remain on Bajor, the occupation that had defined the region for 5 decades was coming to an end. Back on Mpot Nor, Nolan stood in his office, watching the ships depart. Ilara joined him, her holographic form somehow appearing as weary as he felt. "We helped create it, didn't we?" Nolan said quietly. "The chips, the biomimetic gel, the plasma, we couldn't have known," Ilara replied. "We thought it was just another payday." Nolan nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. The victory against the Vorpal had come at a high cost, not just in lives, but in certainty. The clean lines between right and wrong, friend and enemy, had blurred beyond recognition. As the final ships disappeared into warp, Nolan turned back to the business of running his operations. The galaxy wouldn't stop for his existential crisis. There were cargo shipments to manage, diplomatic relations to maintain, and a station to run. And somewhere out there, new threats were emerging that would one day require his attention. For now, though, he had done what was necessary. The rest would come in its own time. "Status report," he said, returning to the command center. Life, like the stars themselves, continued its endless cycle. Epilogue. 3 weeks after the Vorpal's destruction, Nolan stood at the viewport in his private office aboard Mpot Nor, watching distant ships traverse the trade routes he'd spent decades developing. His moment of reflection was interrupted by Ilara's holographic form materializing beside him. "Nolan, the cult's back," Ilara stated with an exasperated tone. "Oh, well, that's okay, I guess. I mean, they can't hurt us, can they?" Nolan stopped, frowning. "No, wait. Is this the one that worships me from afar, or the one that wants to cleanse me in the holy fire?" Ilara's holographic form flickered as she accessed her databases. "Neither, actually. This appears to be a new group. They call themselves the Eternal Shadows of Mercer's Light." Nolan groaned, running a hand through his hair. "That's a mouthful. What's their deal?" "According to their manifesto, they believe you're an immortal being sent to guide the galaxy through subtle manipulations of trade and conflict. They've established a temple on one of the moons in the Denorius Belt, and they're dedicated to observing and documenting your actions to decipher your grand cosmic plan." "Fantastic," Nolan muttered, turning away from the viewport. "Just what I need, celestial stalkers. Any chance they'll just go away if we ignore them?" Ilara's expression turned grave as she pulled up a data feed. "Unlikely. They've already started a bidding war over your used coffee mug from that cafe on Risa." Nolan buried his face in his hands with a prolonged groan, then suddenly popped up with a calculating smile. "How much is it up to?" 17 bars of gold-pressed latinum," Ilara replied, and rising. Nolan's eyes lit up. "You know, I think I left several coffee mugs at that cafe." He tapped his comm badge. "Trill, set course for Risa. We have a spiritual matter to attend to." As the stars streaked past the viewport, Nolan couldn't help but wonder if his true legacy would be found in the empire he'd built or in the strange myths that seemed to grow around him like persistent weeds. Either way, the galaxy was never dull. In the distance, a single Borg implant pulsed quietly in its containment field, unnoticed and waiting.